So first, good morning to everyone, and thank you for joining this session, and I hope it's useful. Some of it might seem basic, but I've just come from years of experience and feel that even with all this experience I had, I still made mistakes. So knowing the mistakes and how to overcome them is very key, so I can talk about those points. So a very similar topic was presented at this meeting last year by Stephen Flame, and the link is on this slide. And those who want to get it separately, please contact Sudi or Marissa. I will not repeat any of those points because that presentation was extensive and very detailed on many, many points which one must consider and actually work on, like business plans and so on. So in addition, I will not talk about patents and reimbursements, which are going on in the concurrent session right now. So what will I talk about? So firstly, I said, what's the audience? So Marissa Gay sent me this data that there have been 96 Catalyze awardees since it was founded in 2020. As many of you know, it's a 3-year funding. So those who got it in the 2020, of course, finished in 2023. Of these 96, 21 were small companies. About half of them, 49 plus 21, said they was more or less interested in starting a company. So that's important. You learn to consider, new points which you need to have as starting a new company. But 43 have said that they have either founded a company or worked in a startup. So you know some of the ups and downs of a company. It's a real roller coaster ride in a biotech company. So then today you have 65 awardees, and of which 11 are from small companies. And between the 96 and 65, not everybody failed. It's just a very small handful which failed, which shows that the selection process by Catalyze is actually pretty good because early failures do happen in drug discovery and development. So, as it's 3 years, many of them just finished. So what will I cover today? I'll cover family matters. This is exceedingly important. And then characterize the risk of failure. Those two are taken into consideration before starting a company. Then choice of the target, planning for a successful product, and the aim to get breakthrough therapy. Staying power, because those who are good will stay as a company for a longer period of time. And will the therapy meet an unmet need? We hear a lot about the new requirements from the NIH and FDA that they must be really meeting an unmet need. And then developing a target product profile, because this really opens your eyes to what is really needed out there. Then clinical and regulatory input, time and cost to the IND. The first clinical data is important to get investments after this Catalyze grant is finished. We also have market size and cost of treatment. And then minimizing the risk of failure. There's always risk. So how do you minimize it? And who will make a good founder? Many of you are thinking of being founders of companies. Do you have all of the right characteristics for being a good founder? And then startup company operations, because as you start up, you get a lot of money. What do you do with it? It's great to be, go and buy new furniture, but should you? And then summary and conclusions. So the first, family matters. Founding a biotech company is extremely risky. So you must know if your family is supportive of this. You're giving up a job to start a company. The time commitment is huge, and salary and health benefits are not guaranteed, especially if the company goes under. It sure helps if the partner has a steady job and also is willing to tolerate your long working hours and travel. Your family needs more of your time if you have a young family. And will you be able to let your spouse look after the young children for many hours, especially when you travel? It certainly helps if you have a local extended family members who can help. And if you have your mother, your father, your grandparents, etc., to help is very good. Another thing to consider is the location. It matters to the investors and also matters to the company because the culture of the company could be reflected by the location. I'll give you an example. When I started my first biotech company in New Jersey, it is a state of big pharma. The people I could hire had big pharma mentality. 9 to 5, they don't take ownership, etc. I also had a company in Researca, which is the Cleveland area. And again, that is more manufacturing mentality. So be careful where you start your company. It has to be in an area where there's biotech mentality, which is quite different from major pharma. So considering all this, just think about it. Do you really want to jump into this? So let's first look at the risk of failure. So be well informed of what it takes to found a biotech company. Starting a biotech company is not at all like starting a tech or an AI company. You don't have the FDA, you don't have patients to worry about, you don't have long-term follow-ups to worry about. And pricing, all that is not really included in a tech and AI. You're more responsible for yourself. You have more control on what you're doing. In biotech, you have less control on what you're doing because you have external entities like the FDA. You are taking a calculated risk. There's always risk in life, but this is a calculated risk. So measure those risks before you start, and do not be complacent. There could be competitors. Stay alert to submarine patterns. Remember, science does not happen in a vacuum. You're learning from other people's findings, and other people are learning from those findings too. So it could occur right in the middle of when you think you've got it. And then high risk, high reward happens for innovation. And there is, of course, high risk and low reward if not clearly differentiated from other products. It's very important for first-in-class products because those are, of course, meeting that unmet need we talked about. But there's also a place for Me Too products. Me Too products are lower risk, but they also have lower reward. But sometimes the Me Too product could be the best in class and could be a high reward. So think about that. And then, are you still meeting an unmet need? Even a Me Too product may be meeting an unmet need, and we will address that. An important thing to do is to look at past failures and successes in your therapeutic indication, because this measures the risk of the clinical trial, the design, the size, the patient availability, etc. Can you finish this in a reasonable time? For instance, if you pick a narrow spectrum antifungal, which is going on right now by a certain company, you could take 10 years to do a trial. You don't have enough patients with that particular infection. Or, even in cystic fibrosis, if you remember the approval of Arikayce took a very long time to run a trial because there were not enough patients available and was controlled by the Cystic Fibrosis Foundation. So the company could continue because CF Foundation has a lot of money. But on the other hand, if you are to do it with investors, there may not be enough time to finish that particular study. So moving on to choice of targets product and planning for a successful product. There's a lot of good science and biology out there, chemistry, and you see publication of manuscripts in leading journals, but this is no guarantee for a successful product. Just because you say you got a publication in Nature, no, it doesn't mean you're going to get a successful product. And most startups begin with a favorite science and then force fit the target to the disease you're going to be doing. It should really be the reverse. You should find the disease and then see if your target fits that. A thorough understanding of the biology of the entire therapeutic area is essential. And to understand also the portfolio of products which are currently available and their adverse effects and drawbacks, their advantages. This defines the patient's needs. So you have to understand the entire therapeutic area and then your specific indication. So it's a very broad understanding of biology. The other part is that you have to look in your crystal ball because the need you're going to meet is not now. You're going to take 5 to 10 years to meet that, to get your drug to the market. So currently popular disease targets and drugs are not likely to be of interest, that many years from now. So you really have to look to the future. Other investigators may also be working on similar products, and they may be surfacing the product, and they may meet you to that final product early. And differentiation of current product investors today, but differentiation is also key to getting good pricing and market share later on, 10 years from now. And being first in class is not easy. There are only so many first in class drugs. Indication, and it's not easy to be the trailblazer. And I'll give you an example. In the early 80s, 1980s, so a long time ago, guys, Captopril was made. Captopril was the first angiotensin didn't know whether it would sell. Of course, it was a blockbuster drug for squib and had other follow-on products by Merck, etc. And it's a big treatment for hypertension today. But it takes time. If you are the front runner, it's hard to create a market because there is no market for you yet. You're creating that market. Now, I'll give you an example of how one should expand indications as soon as possible. Novo Nordisk, I think everyone knows about GLP-1 agonist, Wegovy. It's on television every day, semaglutide for the GLP-1 agonist. And Novo Nordisk developed it for diabetes. It was quickly followed on by Eli Lilly with tirzepatide. It's a GLP-1 and a GIP-1 agonist, GIP-1 and GLP-1 agonist, Mounjaro. And this had expanded indications for both diabetes and obesity. And they took the market. They had a slight advantage also in the treatment because they had two targets, but they took the market. And as you know, I think it was last week, Novo Nordisk is going to cut back in the staff, etc., because now, they didn't have enough backup support. Excuse me. Now, so it's very important to patent very broadly when you have a new target. And selection patents can be filed later. Excuse me, I'm going to get a sip of water here. You need resources to be able to do a patent filing. A well-written, thought-through patent needs an expert. So you should also develop backup products, because if the first one fails, you have the next one in that same area, because there's no guarantee the first one's going to work. So you build a very high fence around your product patent so analogs cannot be made very easily and fast. Excuse me. So the staying power. The important thing is if you have a first-in-class or a completely new product, you have a vertical leap in that therapeutic value, which is what happened with Novo Nordisk. Novo Nordisk was valued more than the cap of Denmark when it first came out. And versus incremental advancement, if you have a Me Too product, which is happening now, you have tons of different, obesity drugs now. Some of them are approved, some of them are coming out. The staying power is to create that monopoly around your therapeutic area, around your therapy, not just your target. I'll give you an example. This is from Merck's Keytruda. So Keytruda, it's a PD-1 inhibitor. And interestingly, this has a very interesting history. It came out of Organon in Europe. Schering-Plough bought it, and then Merck bought Schering-Plough in 2009. And it got approved for melanoma, which Merck pushed like hell to get it done for melanoma first, and then it expanded to other cancers. Keytruda then failed in head and neck cancer. So the first indication need not be the hardest target. It's better to reach for that low-hanging fruit and get approval. BMS was also in development with Opdivo. This is also a PD-1 inhibitor, and Merck beat them to be the first one to get to market with the melanoma drug, because they didn't pick the hardest target, and they moved very fast, put all their efforts behind it. So if you're sure of how to hit hard, Opdivo was approved for BMS only in 2014, but also for melanoma, but they were of course not first to the market. So will your therapy meet an unmet need? So even if your product is directed against a different target than what is currently being used, it does not promise the good product that it's going to be a good product unless it shows an advantage in efficacy, safety, or convenience to the patient, to the doctor. Novelty in science is not really appreciated by a doctor and patient. The treatment should be more effective or have an advantage over existing therapies to be appreciated. Now I'll give you examples of those. Overcoming drug resistance is an advantage. So if it overcomes the resistance created by the first drug, of course, it's an advantage. It could happen in antibacterials, it could happen in antivirals, it could happen in cancers. Convenience and better tolerability are advantages to the patient. Differentiation is the key. Are you better? That's the most important thing. Being first in class, of course, gives you a first mover advantage, but being best in class, because the first one may have some disadvantages. It may not be well tolerated. It may be causing resistance quickly. And so if you have a better drug, which is orally absorbed and is easy to administer, is well tolerated, you could come up with the best in class, and you could still get the market because of that. Now, in Merck's case, it had the first mover advantage, as I just mentioned, for Keytruda, but they expanded the different indications very quickly. They did many indications in cancer, including lung, which is a very big problem. And so Keytruda, they also had less of a dosage frequency relative to Opdivo. So it had many advantages. And so it has been not only the best in class, the first in class, but also the best in class. Now, it also says that, Merck is making as much money from Keytruda and more than what they paid for Schering-Plough. So how does one decide, do you really have all the properties you need? So you need to take pen to paper and set up a table called the Target Product Profile, or TPP. And you also need it for the FDA for your filings. And basically, you're deciding what are the properties you're looking for. And you have an essential profile and you have an ideal profile. As children used to say, must have versus nice to have. So that's what you're looking at here. You're looking at indications, patient population, therapeutic modality, efficacy, safety, dosing, administration, approach, mechanism of action, and biological activity. If you put these together, you will realize, do you really have a market for your drug? And 10 years from now, not right now. Now, clinical input. The patient is your customer. That's who you should be designing the drug for, not for making money, not for the Wall Street, et cetera, not for investors. You're making it for the patient. Again, a little story. When I joined Abbott in the mid-'80s, I met with the CEO. He actually used to come and sit at the lunch tables. And he said, I asked him, I said, well, I had just joined. And I said, what would you like us to work on? He says, Prabha, you are a scientist. You've worked in the hospital. Find out from the patient and from the doctor what they want. If you make what the patient or doctor wants, our marketing can sell it. That is a very important message I got, and I never looked at anything else but what the patient or physicians want. Now, thought-leading physicians will also know of products in development, other products, what are the competitors, who's working on what. They know it. They may not be able to speak about them because they're under confidentiality. But listen carefully to get hints of what you should be looking for, what's missing, and then listen to the clinical or medical need for point of view. That's very important because those are the people who are going to be using your drug. Now, time and cost to the IND, to the first clinical data, is very important to be able to get investor money. Because getting that first clinical data shows you are safe in humans. You can be safe in any number of animals, but finally it's the human. The human is the ultimate animal you're going to go after for your drug. So you create a Gantt chart to measure the time and cost to an IND and beyond. Go all the way through the NDA. But up to the IND is what you can really predict very well right now. So toxicology to suit the route of duration of expected treatment. A lot of people do a route and expect that's the way. But if you're planning oral, then do the oral. If you're doing IV, then the toxicology should be IV. Intramuscular, then that's the way it should be. If it's inhaled, that's the way route it should be. And the duration depends on the duration you're planning for treatment. If it's more than 10 days of treatment, you may need to do 3 months toxicology. That's the amount you usually do. If it's inhaled, you may have to do 6 months in the lung. Now, single LD doses are usually published, and people say, oh, it was safe. I gave 1,000 milligrams, orally, and it was safe. Or toxicity in tissue culture cells was totally fine against 5 different cells, and cells were fine. That's totally irrelevant to toxicology, because toxicology also looks at pharmacokinetics, looks at metabolism, etc. Toxicology on the pure product should be done, but not too pure. Now, what is that degree of purity? The reason I say this is when you scale up, there will always be some impurities. If the FDA finds that there are some impurities in your material, then you have to go back and repeat the toxicology on those impurities. So see that there is some impurities which you expect in the final product and do your toxicology on that. So of course, do not ignore the CMC product manufacturing while getting sufficient acceptable GMP material. So you need a little bit for the initial part, for the toxicology, you need a little bit for the phase 1. But be sure to spend some time improving the scale-up, manufacturing, the process improvements, reproducibility, etc., because you need to have that for good pricing later. Also, if you have enantiomers, you have mix of L and R forms in your drug substance. You can't have a drug with two mixtures anymore. You need to have the pure enantiomer and show that that's active. And again, as I mentioned, the purity is going to be important. For the in the old days, you could get dual drugs approved. For instance, ofloxacin, which is still uses eye drops, is an L and R form. And then levofloxacin was made from it, which became a blockbuster drug with J&J, and levofloxacin is the L form. So reducing time and cost of the IND, let's talk about it. Sometimes you look at it and say, oh my God, it's going to be 3 years from now before I can file an IND. It's a very long time. But there's a great way to get started and to take away some of the risk, and it's by jump-starting. Jump-starting your program. And how do you do that? Is to take a clinical product from a company which has been abandoned. And you wonder, why would any big company abandon a big product? Well, we'll talk about that. Every day in the news, you see some other small company which has taken on an abandoned drug and has succeeded. I think I found 3 last week. But anyway, I'll talk about 3 right now, which were in the past. So one is the bimagrumab, which is an activin type 2 receptor muscle to create muscle mass. Novartis was developing it to improve the muscle mass of elderly people. So, as you know, elderly people lose muscle mass and you need to build it. They did the study, but think about it. I talked about doing a study which is possible, which is feasible. To do a study in an elderly person is very hard. If you're already over 80, let's say over 70 or 75, 80, you're losing muscle mass, but you also might die in the middle of your study. So if your muscle mass might be gaining, but you may not be living to show people this. So it becomes very hard to run the study. So they kill the product. But then Fernandes took this compound forward and then sold it to Lilly, literally flipped it over to Lilly for $2 billion. And the reason is when one takes Wegovy and stuff, one of these GLP agonists, you not only lose fat, you lose muscle mass. So they need to combine their drug with a drug which helps to build muscle mass. So Lilly took it forward to put it forward with their drug. The next one I'll talk about is Ohtuvayre. This drug is an inhaled COPD product, a PDE3 and PDE4 antagonist. And this drug was first developed by GSK. Now, GlaxoSmithKline decided to combine PDE3, PDE4, both an anti-inflammatory and a bronchodilator for people with COPD. And they thought if you could do both in one product taken orally, that would help COPD patients a lot. But it failed with oral absorption. So they gave it up. They abandoned it. So Rhino Pharma took it forward. They made an inhaled product from it. They couldn't raise money because, it's very hard to raise money for a drug which has failed from a big company like GSK. It was a small company. And Verona then took it forward. It's a local company in Raleigh. And they took it forward and they did the full COPD development as an inhaled product. And you can imagine if you're a COPD patient, you have multiple drugs you have to take orally. There's drug-drug interactions and so on. And you have to really be careful on these patients as to what they can take. So getting an inhaled COPD product with 2 different activities, you can drop 2 of those medicines you're going to be taking. It's a huge advantage. And this is for chronic use. It's a big product. And Merck paid $10 billion with a B for this particular product after they finished their phase 3 trial. But Verona took a lot of risk and was able to raise the money, do the trial, which was a very difficult trial to do really, and they got $10 billion for it. Let's talk about a third product. This is not something which was licensed from somebody else, but it's our old friend insulin. Afrezza. This was the first inhaled insulin developed by a company called Mankind. And they have a special technology which allows the drug to get deep down into the lung and get absorbed. It's approved for adults. So instead of injecting yourself, a lot of people don't like needles. I, for instance, don't like needles. So, inhalation of insulin is fantastic for diabetics. And even more so, it was just published that they've just finished their trial for pediatrics. And it looks great. So if you're a 3-year-old and need to take insulin, Well, it's hard for a 3-year-old to self-inject, so somebody else has to inject them, and they don't like needles to start with. So it's much easier to get inhaled insulin. And this was even more difficult and a big challenge because Pfizer's had a drug, an inhaled insulin, which failed in 2007. It was called Exubera. It made a lot of news on that time when Pfizer failed with it because they projected that to be a big product. But we're very happy that mankind has this product now approved for adults and hopefully later in pediatrics. It's not yet approved for children. So again, these are novel. If you're the patient, it's fantastic, these products. So novelty is in the eyes of the beholder. In this case, the patient believes all of these are very good. So knowing your therapeutic area of interest thoroughly will help you find these gems. So as I was writing this particular presentation, I saw CNE News, which just came out in August. And there's an article in there. It's called No Drug Left Behind. It's a whole article on abandoned products and how to pick them and how many of these drugs have been made, which are successful. There have been 2 or 3 just last week, as I said. So this is getting to be very popular. It reduces your risk because they've already been in humans. Now moving on to how am I doing on time? Sudi, am I good on time? Yes.
Sorry,
okay.
yes. Yeah.
Okay, so regulatory input. So meeting with the FDA is very, very important. Have pre-IND meetings and beyond. Meet as often as you can possibly. Contact them by email. They do answer. And after the IND, of course, meet with the EMA and the PMDA at Japan. And those are all very important feedbacks because sometimes some countries also have different issues. And if you don't have a regulatory person on board, get a consultant because regulatory language is a different speak. You really have to understand what the FDA is saying and how you deal with them. So get a regulatory consultant or at least hire somebody if you can find a good consultant. But there are lots of good consultants. I think RTI can also help you. The FDA can guide you on what needs to be done, but cannot tell you any information from any other company. And so what they've learned from your competitors, they can't tell you, but they can ask you leading questions. So you listen very carefully to what the FDA says, read between the lines, and just don't answer the question, just take point blank of what they've said. The FDA knows what can fail and will ask you leading questions. So keep in mind that the FDA also has its own bias and is very risk averse. But certainly listen very carefully. They will send the minutes in writing, what was said at these meetings, and read it very carefully and have even your consultants read it. The FDA has changed recently, as many of you know, so touch base with them now if you've had prior meetings with them. Now, the market size. So if the product is first in class and the best in class, the company can monopolize the market for that indication, and that's great. Humira is an example, Keytruda is an example, and now for obesity, the drug from Lilly, tirzepatide, is an example. The size of the market will depend on whether it's acute therapy or chronic therapy. Acute therapy like an antibacterials, antivirals, don't have a huge market because you treat the patient gets better, and you don't take it forever. You kill the goose which is laying the golden eggs. So in chronic therapy, you're taking it for the rest of your life, and that gets a lot of money to the companies. So, and then one and done products like gene therapy, it's fantastic for the patient, but it costs a lot of money, but that's the one-time revenue. Now, hospital versus community use is also very important because hospital use, again, is for a short period of time, and community use for a longer time and much bigger population in the community. There are more people who are healthy than sick, so that's good. So the primary use indication is another thing one should be looking for. Are you going to be used first, or are you going to be used as a backup drug or after the primary drug fails? Because the market gets small. Because the primary drugs works for most of the patients. A few people it fails for, and your drug is given for them. So it's important to look at, is it a primary drug or a backup drug for later? The delivery route, IV, is mostly in the hospital. You can do some in the community. IM, oral, or inhaled. All that is very, very important for looking at your market size. The projection of the market size must be realistic. I've had so many people say, oh, I got a $60 billion market. I said, you got to be kidding. Which disease is this? So are they all dying like flies out there? No. So carve out a small portion of that market. And because the whole market is really monopolized, even by the first product which comes out. The cost of treatment. So the cost of the product, when you make it, is very important. Not just the AP, but how you deliver it. So one and done gene therapy products have been priced in the millions. This has resulted in very slow uptake, as you know. So what is curative and life-changing for the patient may not be affordable. So please imagine that right up front. So cost of the treatment in the hospital or the community. The hospital, do you have a step down so the patient from the hospital can take it when they go home? So unless the patient's benefit is remarkable, the pricing is against the current standard of care, which could be a generic. Excuse me again. And I don't even have COVID. Anyway, to minimize the risk of failure. So do speak to thought leaders who have been involved with trials in your therapeutic target area. They know the hang-ups of doing that particular trial. They know the patient need. So balance the speed with quality. Investors will be pressing you to hurry up, hurry up, hurry up. If you're a public company, it's even harder. You need to hurry up and get to the market. But you got to get quality data. Garbage in, garbage out later. So you've got to be able to get good quality data. Improve scale-up manufacturing and reduce the costs. As you go along, do that as much as possible. Don't ignore the manufacturing. There is a beta-lactam combined with beta-lactamase inhibitor. They haven't been able to make it. They've got their phase 3 done. They got approval, but they can't sell it because they can't make it in a combined product. It interacts and falls apart. So this is the problem. You got to focus on this first. Another story is Ritonavir. Ritonavir was the first drug when I was at Abbott for HIV. First drug, huge market, right, for HIV treatment. This is in the mid-80s, late 80s actually. And in the first week of manufacturing, when they're trying to get their first uptick into manufacturing, it froze in the pipes and clogged up the manufacturing pipes at Abbott, which is very, very good at manufacturing, and they failed in that. And they lost almost 6 months in getting back to the market. That's a lot of money, 6 months of sales. So you minimize regulatory delays. We talked about talking to the FDA and so on, and having all the paperwork ready to go. And getting your backup product is very important because not all first products survive. And then primary and additional indications. We talked about Novo Nordisk versus Eli Lilly, and to get a pharma partner. That certainly helps and validates your company. Now moving on to who will make a good founder. So one who is creative and intuitive with a broad, deep understanding of both biology and medicine and the therapeutic area. You have to recognize your strengths and weaknesses. Nobody knows it all. Nobody can do it all. So you should have the ability to hire the required expertise and to empower them. So ability to accept and discuss different opinions with the team on how to execute different aspects of the work in the company is important. Have many meetings with them, meet them as often as possible. An ability to kill the program if needed. That's very important. My boss at BMS used to say, it's harder to kill a product than to kill your mother-in-law. So having a backup candidate will help you kill the problem product. So that's why it's so important to have a backup candidate. So focused and hardworking is important, positive personality, passionate to a degree, and flexible. Experience is the best teacher. So a track record of having done this before, hands-on knowledge of drug development, well-published, recognition in the field, reputation, all helps in raising money and doing the work. It's hard to develop drugs without infrastructure, which is available in pharmaceutical companies. You need an experience in building the team with the skills needed, example, finance, business, sourcing, regulatory, clinical, manufacturing, the whole thing. Because no single person knows all this, not even in big pharma. Coming to the operations, You conserve cash immediately. As soon as it comes in, be careful. Put tight strains on that. And you stay small. Outsource as much as possible. I always try to conserve cash. People used to say, I squeaked when I walk. I was so tight. So the actual development costs are usually much more than planned, and many steps usually take longer than planned. That's the way it is, even though you have your Gantt chart done. Sometimes things take longer, especially since you don't have all of that in-house under your control. A can-do culture of employees is very important, and many employees in startup companies will multitask, and that's required because they have ownership in the company. Location, as I said earlier, can contribute to the type of culture you have at the company. An enthusiastic staff, each employee should feel like the owner of the company and love their work. And they, of course, have options at the company, stock options. So a small board of directors is important, but it should be teamed with the founders. Otherwise, investors can have one goal and the company has a different goal. It's very important that they're teamed, but the CEO must be recognized as the company leader. It's also important to build an aura of the public aura about the company. Get the local people talking, get the country talking. This gets back to the FDA that people want this drug. Get the patients talking, get the doctors talking about your product, that they're waiting for this product. Companies which have done that have been vastly successful. So let me summarize. I'm coming to the end now. So are you ready to start a company? Knowing the commitment and risks which will be involved. Do you have a team with the right culture, energy, and knowledge? Understand the therapeutic area portfolio and the unmet need. Find a product for the unmet need and do not force fit the product to the disease. Differentiation from the current products and products in development are very important. Anticipate the time to market in about 10 years from the lead molecule, because that's when will the product be needed at that time? What else will become available? Will the patient population be available for the clinical trials? Get regulatory and clinical input early and then repeat that throughout the years you're in development, because things change out there in the clinical need. Know the measured risks and steps to minimize those risks. Listen and read between lines of the regulators and thought-leading physicians. And listen very carefully, because it may not be just at face value on what they said. Develop a TPP and a realistic Gantt chart for cost and time to product, but anticipate that many steps may need to be repeated. So patent very broadly, identify a backup product or products. First indication should not be the hardest. Get the FDA approved for the low-hanging fruit first. Expand indications quickly if possible. Develop realistic market size and cost of treatment based on the intended site of use. And keep in mind that cash flow into the company should be primarily spent on developing the product. Now, in conclusion, you can improve your odds for success with good data. A good team that works hard, perseveres courageously despite adversity, and investors that are supportive of the company mission. However, founders still need luck. You need hard work, good science, and good luck. And with that, I'll wish you good luck to all of you. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Prabhavathi. This was excellent. And now we will open it for any questions that our listeners may have. Any questions? Okay, while we're waiting to find out if anybody has any question, can you share some of... Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Hi, Sudhi. Hi, Vicky. And thank you, Prabha. That was an excellent talk. So I work for a small company, Catalyze funded company here in Houston. It's part of the Texas Medical Center, and we work in the oncology space. We have novel assets, novel mechanism of action, first in class, but we don't seem to be able to convince an investor to put money on the table. So in spite of being able to check most of the boxes that you've talked about, we are unable to generate investor interest and we are in the clinic right now. So we're actually dosing patients in the clinic. But until we have maybe phase 1B or phase 2 proof of clinical concept, people don't want to invest in the technology. So for a startup to be able to take something that far is pretty difficult. So how do you propose that, a startup with a good idea can actually progress its asset portfolio to the point where it becomes attractive to investors?
So you must remember, investors work on the fact that you're going to make a profit for them, right? Every dollar they give you get $10 back is what they're working on, and that you have to succeed. Cancer, is always very, interesting to get into because there's always a patient need, but it's also high risk. There's a lot of gravestones in the Parkinson's area, in the cancer area. And so they're afraid if they've lost money there. So the question is, you have to convince them why your product, why the data you have is good enough for them to fund you. You have to show them the market, how you're going to succeed. If you do the full plan to the end and show this is the reason you believe, and you have to be convincing about that, how you're going to succeed. I'll give you a little story there just to help you. You have to be different. So in 2008 and 2009, when the financial market had collapsed, I was at JP Morgan and people said, you can make as many presentations. I was an antibacterial, full things. They said, you can't raise money. You can't raise money. I said, of course I can. So I went out. I made presentations to, I think, every single day, 23 some presentations I had made. I can tell you, these investors have seen presentation after presentation as PowerPoints at JP Morgan. I told them, I went in without a PowerPoint. They said, where's your PowerPoint? I said, I don't have it. I'm going to tell you about it. And I said, I actually joked about it. I said, you guys have deep pockets but short hands, so I want you to be able to reach in there, so I'll tell you about it. And they laughed and they funded me. I came back home and I was among the top 3 companies which got funded because you have to grab their interest. You have to really grab their interest. So what are you saying which is important to them? Well, we're happy to talk about it, because each product is so different. It's hard for me to generalize. I'm not an expert in the cancer area, but I'm not an expert in anything, I think, anymore. But, I can advise you if you wish, but, I'm here to help.
Thank you.
So I think Nitin's got his hands up.
Yes, thanks, Prabha, for such a valuable insight on various aspects. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit, because one of the challenges that researchers face, it's not just one, but it's a combination of many, which is the funding, the investors, the engagement, the logistics, the collaborators. And because of that, there is always anxiety that the project may slow down. And it does slow down most of the times. And having a boosted pace of success is critical. So can you give some examples or elaborate for our researchers what usually works that can accelerate the success or the progress of the company?
So it's all about differentiation. So if you're picking a target and a disease area, which is already, obviously patients have some treatment. It may not be the optimal treatment, but there's some treatment for every patient today. So if you have that, why is yours different? And what data do you have to support that? Or what data are you going to generate to support that? The closer you are, of course, with clinical data, the easier it is to get funded. But until you get that, it used to be mostly government funding. It was called the Valley of Death, and you could really get government funding to fund those areas. But again, it's the focus and the differentiation. And most investors don't want to see you too diverse. So if you have more than one product, they don't like it. But develop the backup product, because sometimes the most potent, the compound which binds the tightest, may actually fail from toxicology or some other reason, may not be soluble. They usually say the best drugs are like rocks, they don't dissolve. So, you may need to get solubility to get oral bioavailability.
Okay. And does that also apply to technologies, like products other than the biologics?
Oh, yes, for sure. Even with that, differentiation is key. If you can say you're totally different from others, why think about the patient. Why is the patient going to reach for your product? Why is the doctor going to reach for your product? That's the one line you have to give and convince the investor to be able to do that.
Excellent. Thank you. I hope it helps everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks. Dr. Velasquez?
Thank you, Prabha. This was a wonderful lecture. Learned a great deal. I work in the vascular regeneration space, and specifically one of the products is a gene therapy product. You spoke to the challenges around getting funding for gene therapy products, and I was wondering if you had some specific recommendations as how to envision overcoming some of those challenges, in particular investor funding for GMP manufacturing of the gene therapy product, which is essential for starting getting the IND.
So for gene therapy is very hard because what has happened is companies have gotten into gene therapy and they have not been able to get a sustained form of money because many patients cannot afford it. But if it's a disease which you can rationalize that you get the money back over a period of time, if you can finance the product by saying, okay, I think Novartis has done this, is to say, you pay me, $1,000. So I'm just made up a number, okay? $1,000 today, and if it's successful, pay me $1,000 each year for another 10, 20 years. So you have a source of revenue. So that's what you have to create for investors and companies. So you got to make enough money now, but don't try to get it all up front for a single product. You've got to be able, if you are so sure your gene therapy is going to work for that duration, see what you save the hospitals, what you save the patient, what you save the insurance companies, and over those years, and charge them over those years. That might be a better way based on success. People are not afraid to pay upon success. So for the failures, you will not be making the money. Does that help?
That's very helpful. Thank you. That's a very new approach of thinking about, this discussion of return on investment for the product users. Thank you.
You're very welcome. You
Thanks,
may want
Prabha.
to check you may want to check the Novartis. I think they have a plan like that, and you may want to check their website on their products as to how they're doing it.
I will. Thank you.
We got a request that if you can stop sharing so people can have a better. Sorry about that.
I was so happy I could do it. So let's see. Stop share. There you are.
Yeah, that's good. Thank you.
Sure.
There are two questions that came in. One is for academic professor. I was wondering if there are examples for startup company and success stories.
Oh, yes. There are many of them, which are actually even the discovery of the first tyrosine kinase inhibitor and so on, were from companies. But right there at RTI, I mean, the discovery of both
Yes.
camptothecin and Taxol, I know both of them. I have pictures with both of them. Monroe and Wani. I mean, they were both academic professors, and at those times, of course, they did not have the ability to take shares in companies which developed these products. But now the universities have gotten smart, and the government also has gotten smart, and they will take shares, in the company which is being founded. So the academic professor can stay there in the academia and license it out and maybe be one of the scientific advisors to the company so they can manage it. Or they could leave, and start the company. And I think there are a lot of examples of that. And today, with AI and so on, and, being able to create molecules, if you really look at many, many things which have been done out there, they all started the company. The company, takes advantage of it later, and you think it was discovered at the company. It wasn't. Even some of the examples I gave you, none of them were discovered at the companies. It always came out of the universities.
Okay, thank you. The other question is any advice?
So one second. The biggest example is the GLP-1 agonist. I mean, that lady, had worked at the universities, trying to make the GLP-1 agonist.
Okay.
Sorry.
Thank you. I did not know that one.
Yeah.
Any advice, thoughts when a faculty license their technology from the university? Are there specific terms to avoid because future investors might consider it as an issue?
Well, the idea is a couple of things. I'm not an expert in this space, but I always look to get as much as possible. Like, don't take out single products. Take that area, that space, not just the therapeutic target even, but that entire therapeutic space, because there are know-hows and things which kind of affect what you're doing. So try to get as much of the space as possible. Second is, of course, the royalties due back to the universities. The universities are getting more and more greedy, and they want more and more. They don't realize there's a huge risk ahead. And they're stacking royalties later because you may have to license the formulation method or license something else which you need to partner with that. So stacking royalties are very important later for the licensee because that all shows on the profit at the end. So minimize the royalties and maybe pay milestones instead. Milestones are preferred to royalties because that's a one and done payment.
That's a great advice.
Can I add a little bit onto that, having first-hand experience in this regard, that most academic universities have their IP offices and their guidelines are pretty standardized and well established. So normally academic researchers don't have a huge flexibility to negotiate terms in the beginning. Only it becomes crucial when the company becomes a multi-million or let's say $20 million plus valuation company, and it is they want to exit or it's being taken over by another big firm, then only the stakeholding terms and conditions are negotiated. Other than that, it's just a matter of royalties if some other company has sublicense. So I would suggest academic researchers not to worry too much about that in the beginning.
Okay.
Thank you for that.
Thanks. And we did have another session, concurrent session on IP that will be posted. So even though you're in this session, but once it's posted on our website, you can go back and listen to it. Or if you have any questions, let your tech lead and project manager know, and we can answer any questions you may have on that. I think we're almost done. We only have 3 minutes before we're put back into the main room.
So thank you all very much. I appreciate your time and the questions, and feel free to reach out. Sudhi has all my contact information. Be happy to give my thoughts anytime.
Yes, thank you, Prabha. And I, as I mentioned before, I was, one of the first 10 people that worked on one of her companies. And I can tell you firsthand that she is so passionate about drug development. That was really contagious. Everybody worked very hard, and it gave me the love of working for startups. So I really appreciate, keeping in touch with Prabha, and I appreciate your time again. Thank you.
Thank you, Sudhi.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you all. We can go ahead and click leave breakout room right where you would log out of your Zoom meeting. There's an option that says leave breakout room in blue. That's what we want to press.